through what it was like, when you first got the project to design the Epicenter. What was that process like of figuring out what to build on the site?
Yeah, it's been about 15 years ago, so it's been quite a long time. There was actually a project designer at the firm at the time that handled a lot of that. I was the project architect, but it was very exciting. It was very fluid. They were, the Aloft Hotel was not even a part of the project, and when we first got started, we actually started construction before that part even came on. A lot of people don't realize there's multiple owners of the property. The Epicenter itself is only the retail piece, the mixed-use part at the bottom. The Aloft has its own owner, as well as what was going to be a condo tower. It eventually turned into the hotel that got built on top.
So what was the philosophy when it came to designing the?
Yeah. So it was kind of urban town center. So back then, outdoor mall wasn't really a very popular thing. There was a couple of tangers and things like that, but the idea was it's kind of an outdoor space. The negative space of the property is what was mostly focused on, the plazas, the spaces between the buildings, more so than the actual buildings themselves.
And I don't know if people realize, because the convention center was there, so you're dealing with a huge block.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the challenges that you all had to confront when it comes to just that space, the location, and handling all that?
Yeah, it's a very complicated project. So a lot of people, some of the things that were happening at the same time, CATS was just getting started, so there was no light rail. So we had meetings with CATS because we shared a property line or a wall with them, and then that became the signature stop in downtown. And they wanted it to basically enter into the Epicenter and use it almost like as a public street to bring you up to the front. One of the things that's kind of unique is we actually got started, and the county realized that there was 2 property owners on the site, and it created something called air rights, which had never been a part of North Carolina's codes in the past. It's very common in bigger cities like New York, and we actually had to go to the state fire marshal's office and get a determination on how to continue with the project. NASCAR Hall of Fame was in a similar situation where the tower actually overhung the museum slightly, so they were also stuck. McMurray County was having problems with that, so it actually became a really kind of a trendsetter or something that kind of helped the state along with that.
And I think one of the things let me ask you this: what in particular do you like about the project? What is it about the design that you love about it?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it was just that negative space and the idea that it's actually that's what's the most challenging for the property owner too, is that it has that public/private space that's between all the buildings. And it just kind of energizes the whole property. It was meant to be more of a mix of uses in there. Unfortunately, it kind of got taken over by a lot of more clubs. So it kind of had its afternoon lunch crowd, and then it had its evening piece. I think the previous owners, that was one of their challenges, was they were trying to kind of rebrand some of the center to make it more active all the time and not so much just a nightlife spot.
And that's some things like I wanted to, and that was telling you, I'm an architecture buff. I wanted to be an architect until with the amount of math and science involved, that's then I turned to journalism, and I really so that's why I'm particularly interested in this story. You were mentioning some of the kind of the unexpected challenges that developed. How did that affect kind of the ultimate design and what you hope to convey from the design versus like, for example, what you mentioned, what ended up happening with more so of a kind of club life type and not as much mixed uses?
I guess can you repeat? I wasn't really following
how the design, how everything ended up turning out. Was there anything in particular that you wish could have been done differently, or is it just sometimes are things just out of your control when it comes to just how the properties end up?
Yeah, I think the property itself, like I said, it got started and the design kept changing as we were building it. It was such a long construction process. Like, how people don't understand, there's a 4-story underground parking deck that's beneath the Epicenter, and it has its own structural system versus the buildings that sit on top of it. The taller buildings, it conveys down through it. There was elevator connectivity. There's just all kinds of pieces and parts that we had to work with. But probably, I guess, just as it progressed, there was we started off with nicer materials, and as we got further along, the owner couldn't afford some things. It was just becoming, it started off. That's how the Epicenter kind of got into financial trouble. Is as we got further along, we couldn't get it opened, and things just ended up a little bit put together not quite as well as it should have been.
I'm guessing as an architect, that must be a challenge because you have your dream design, and then you have to balance all of these. It's like you're walking a tightrope essentially, a tightrope, with just having to balance all these competing things.
Yeah, very much so. That's part of our job. They call that value engineering, but it's really maximizing the client's budget or money that they have for their project, and that's kind of what makes architects, such a great, interesting field to be in.
I know this is kind of an awkward question to ask. I'm sure you've probably read, people, criticisms of the design, and part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you because I wanted to get. I feel like we haven't heard directly from you about your thoughts, when people are like, oh, it should be torn down or this and that. I mean, as an architect, what would you want people to understand about your design, about the project, and what may be missing from the conversation?
Yeah, I think one of the things that wasn't really our doing was that when the first owner got it, they got this kind of unlimited signage rights, which was very unique, and now it's almost like they try to make it like Times Square. So the owner started generating so much money from all the billboards and the signs. Now when you look at it, there's literally like signs on every facade of the entire building everywhere as you look around. And that was really not the intention of our design. But having said that, I think that it was really, back in its heyday, like they said, it was really a very popular spot. I still, when people ask about my company, I always say, well, we were the project architect for the Epicenter, because everybody knows what it is, whether you liked it, you don't like it now. It's changed over time. I think that's just part of what it was. And I think, like I said, the last owner, I think they just kind of got stuck in, they were trying to convert it into more of an office space and less retail. And obviously with COVID and things happened, and the restaurants got hit and downtown emptied out, it just kind of fell in hard times.
As an architect, can you describe to me just that process when it comes to kind of, I think people don't appreciate necessarily like how to navigate many of these, all these competing challenges that you're having to deal with.
Yeah, it was, so I didn't even mention, so we were actually what was considered the master architect. So there was an architect that was doing the condo tower, another architect that was doing the Aloft Hotel, and then we were handling the bottom and then managing everybody through that. But I think that's what when people ask what the architect does, everybody just thinks it's drawings, but it's really planning. It's like you just said, we're like coming up with all the things that we have to get figured out so that we can continue to move forward, and you don't miss a step so they have to go backwards, and just getting that information, and no matter who it is you have to go get it from.
If new owner comes in, hands you the keys to the kingdom, if you will, and says, what would be, having seen everything over the years, how obviously how buildings change and how things evolve, what would be your dream when it comes to whatever changes you feel maybe could, bring businesses back to the Epicenter?
Yeah, I was thinking about it last night because I knew that was going to come up, and I've read some of the other people talking about redeveloping it, or somebody's going to buy it because the land's worth so much and put a high rise there or something. I think that a lot of people don't understand the complexity of what's underground. Like I said, there's 4 stories of parking structure beneath that. So I think it really just needs just some life breathed back into it. Maybe it's more of a tech office space or one of those kind of flex workspaces where people can come and go. There's plenty of parking there. It'll be challenging for somebody to try to knock down some of the stuff that's there and put something back, because it is very much a puzzle, like the way that it's been constructed from the ground up. It would take significant, investment to, I think, remove a lot of what's there. And like I said, it's complicated because there are different ownership groups. So there's also a lot of intermingled interest in things that have to stay the way they are.
And I wanted to bring back, because what you mentioned, just so I make sure. So I mean, so the Aloft Hotel, that whole part wasn't even and then the cats, you guys didn't even know about that until you were well into the process.
Yeah, the parking deck, we were already in for permit, so the parking structure was already under construction when Aloft approached the previous owner, and we changed that building. It was going to be a steel frame building like the two smaller ones, and then instead it turned to a cast in place poured concrete structure. So we had to adjust the parking deck down through and create new elevators that could go up into the hotel. Yeah.
Because I know, and something I was reading, and because the one facade, and I'm blanking on the street, that's kind of, was that a result of that, just having to like figure out all those design processes? Is that what kind of led to that? And I apologize, I know because reading from what other people are commenting, I want to give you the opportunity to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, obviously, I don't know, I think that's 3rd Street.
3rd Street, yeah.
3rd Street, where the restaurant is there on the ground floor. But yeah, that back side, there's a lot of challenges. People, like you said, architects are thinking lots of different things. So, like restaurants, when you have exhaust versus fresh air needs, like you have to have a back side to a building. There's utilities, there's things that you have to have. And it was more focused on the interior of the property. So, unfortunately, 3rd Street, I wouldn't say became the back side of the project, but in essence, in some way it did. And that's just how it had happened.
Well, and you were mentioning as well, because then the light rail, they wanted that to be the main station, so I'm guessing you had to do. I think looking back, I think people don't realize, it just seems like there's just it's so many things that people don't realize that just went into this project, and so many considerations.
Oh yeah, there's like tons of little nuanced things. There's the fact that it's a one city block, like you mentioned, but it actually falls like 25 feet from College Street down towards where the light rail is. So how the parking deck came out and getting the cars underneath it, there's a big delivery area underneath. There's actually a crane because all the transformers are buried in a vault beneath the building back there. There's like, I can keep going. There's so many things like unique about that project that even the parking deck, everybody complains about how bad the parking deck design was. Well, when it was originally designed, it was designed as 2 separate parking structures. So they each have, so there's 4 entrances, 2 for the lower level and 2 for the upper level. The lower level was going to be reserved for the condo owners in the tower that never got built. So once the condo person went away, all of a sudden they try to like mingle the 2 garages back together, and there's just some awkward turning spots and things like that in there.
What's the I can't. I mean, what's the biggest thing you hope that people take away from this whole conversation about the Epicenter?
Yeah, like I said, I think that people shouldn't judge it just on the bad things that happened towards the end. I think that it started off in financial problems to begin with the original owner, and it took a while before somebody else came along, and then they kind of got it going and kind of got it back to what it was supposed to have been, and then that person flipped the asset to somebody else who just kind of wanted to steer the ship, and I think it kind of ended up spiraling back down. And I think it's still a great location, a lot of great outdoor space and potential. I think we just have to wait for the city to kind of re-energize it. People are back in the offices downtown. People need places to go eat lunch. I think whoever takes over the asset won't have much problem getting new tenants and people back in there.
One of my last questions, as an architect, like emotionally, I mean, how does it feel like when you have a building that you spend so much time on designing, and then, then all these other things come in, then how does it feel emotionally having to deal with all of that?
Yeah, I always say you kind of have to have thick skin, especially if you work in the retail entertainment sector, because we design what they call a cold dark shell. So we just design the bones of the building, and then tenants come in, and all tenants have their different ideas, and they want to put their kind of imprint on the building and the architecture, and that's normal. You just kind of roll with it and adjust, and sometimes it's not your exact vision, but that's how the world is. And retail's, I would say it's a great, as an architect, to be involved in retail, because it's the gift that just keeps giving because tenants go in and out of business, things change, new people come in. It's just a very kind of fun part of being an architect.
Anything else I forgot to ask or may have missed that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I mean, I think we've been involved with all three owners throughout, helping manage some of the property. I'm interested to see, I guess, what happens with it, and I just think it needs a new owner with a new vision and some life. And I think, like I said, now that the people are back in downtown, I don't think it needs to be erased down to the parking deck or some massive redesign of it. There's plenty of other elements in there that there'll be needs for those kind of uses in downtown.
Anything I forgot to ask or anything you would like?
Your very beginning, you started to talk on that, what's it called, the fly air zone?
The air rights?
Did you understand enough about that? Because that's
that was kind of a big,
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe elaborate on what that is.
If you can, because my understanding, it's kind of above a certain...
So original, like everybody, most people understand the term of a condo. So you can be in a building and you can own your apartment and be above somebody else's apartment. But when you do that, you have to form a homeowners association so that the HOA then manages the whole building. In this one, it's a entire building being owned above another building, and that was not allowed in the building code because property lines go down to the ground. They don't run this way through the building. They run this way, and it was, it's a straight property line. And from the state's and the county's perspective, the issue was it's all about life safety, which is what architects primarily, that's our first and foremost thing that we do, is we maintain people's lives. So stairwells and fire ratings have to be maintained. So their argument was that the stairwell should have been a common property. So they just had to come up with a new legal agreement. But air rights are, like they've been practiced in all the other major cities throughout the United States. It was just North Carolina hadn't had something so complex that had come up yet, and they just needed a way to be able to, review it and approve it.
And because I know, correct me if I'm wrong, because I believe like some of the, like Fahrenheit, for example, like they own the air rights to the property next door that allows them kind of that skyline view. Like just as an example, that's kind of what you're referring to, that kind of.
Yeah, so you're owning something above. It'd be like if, the NASCAR one is a little bit simpler to understand because there was the NASCAR tower that was built and then there was a museum down low. And what happened was the tower actually crossed over the property line of the museum below it. And so the property line actually in the air turned out and then went up. And it was just about understanding, and instead of it being a nice straight line. So it'd almost be like if your neighbor could put an addition on their house and then cantilever over top of your roof.
And so the Epicentre, this is the first major project that...
It was, yeah. And I think the Duke Energy building, when it was back then, it was going to be the Wachovia building, but they had a similar issue. So there was actually, we were in construction, which really brought it to the forefront, but then at the same time, NASCAR was trying to figure out what to do with their building, and then Wachovia Tower was kind of just getting started, and they had something similar where they had different, sometimes it's just investment groups, like to shed your risk, even if it's one ownership, they may have different small companies that own different parts of it, so that way they can manage it, manage the risk in owning it.